Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're excited to have you with us here at the South by Southwest Film Festival. I'm Brenda Robinson, the president of the International Documentary Association. I'll be leading the discussion for this session called Interactive Media Addressing Civil Rights and Race. Interactive storytelling, as we've seen, continues to grow in popularity, engaging participants in exciting new ways from immersive visual design to creative elements that provide dynamic audio experiences. Within this new media space, Frontline PBS has also made its mark. Although known primarily as a documentary series, Frontline produces a range of content, including several Emmy Award-winning interactive projects such as Inheritance, The Last Generation about the effects of climate change, and also more recently, The Virus at Sea, which provided a harrowing view of the early days of the pandemic. Their latest, called Unresolved, is an exploration into the unsolved civil rights era cold cases and their relationship to today's cases concerning racial violence. This digital first, multi platform project features innovative storytelling through interactive media, a podcast series, an immersive installation and exhibition, as well as a forthcoming film, all to provide a national conversation and way of addressing America's difficult history concerning race and violence. Joining me now for this conversation about Unresolved are the project's executive producers, Dawn Porter and Rainey Aronson Rath. Welcome to both of you. First, let me just give a little bit of background on both of them, just two magnificent producers in our field. Dawn is a prolific and award-winning documentary filmmaker whose work has appeared on HBO, PBS, Discovery, and Netflix, just among a few others. She is currently directing and executive producing an Apple TV multi-part documentary series and a National Geographic documentary on the Tulsa Massacre of 1921. Executive producer Rainey Aronson Rath oversees the Frontline series, and in that role, she's directing the editorial vision for both television and online. Rainey executive produces over 20 documentaries each year on the most critical issues facing the nation and the world. Under her leadership, Frontline expanded well beyond the national PBS broadcast to feature shorts, interactive projects, and podcasts. Some projects are distributed within film festivals and theaters, and she's won every major award in broadcast journalism, having earned 2 Oscar nominations, including last year's standout for Sama. It's such a pleasure to be here with the two of you today. So, Dawn, if I may, I'd like to start with you and just we'll unpack and explore together why we come to this subject matter in this particular creative way. But I just wanted to start by asking if you could give us a brief synopsis of the project. And I'll say, I want to add a little comment in here of personal connection. First of all, I'm a huge fan of your work. I look at your body of work from John Lewis, Good Trouble, to Gideon's Army and more. It's just very expansive, and it encompasses the vital subjects around law, civil rights, race, and violence. I'm very curious to know what was different or unique about this project in particular, and what drew you to it.
Well, thanks so much for having us both to spotlight this extraordinary project, which I am just thrilled to be a part of. Rainey invited me to partner with her, and the first thing that drew me to this is the ability to work with Frontline and the ability to work with Rainey. Even before Frontline, Rainey is known throughout our industry as just an exceptional journalist, but also an exceptional leader. And so that was something that was very interesting to me. Just, all of our work is collaborative. And so when you have the opportunity to work with people who are at the top of their game in so many areas, that's, a wonderful opportunity. But this project, I think as artists and filmmakers, as well as journalists, we're always looking for ways to expand our storytelling abilities. And this project was just such a visionary, remarkable opportunity. This had been in development at Frontline for 2 years. It was the Frontline producers who came up with the idea, and then they slowly built a team around their core of an idea. So the project is an exploration of something called the Till List, which is a list of 151 names of people who it is thought that their deaths are related to racial violence. So There's a list of these names that the Justice Department compiled, and it was really the opportunity to take a 360 look at not only how the list came to be, what the investigation was, but also give life and respect and dignity to the people. So not to just focus on their deaths, but to focus on their lives. So this is a really comprehensive look at law and justice and civil rights, and our government's ability to investigate and bring justice to families, as well as to the people who are victims of violence. So it was really that multi-part look. So to do a podcast, which is a deep dive into the Justice Department's efforts, to also do an extraordinary museum installation that will be, we can talk more about what that will be, but it's an artistic rendering that allows you to experience just part of the volume of so many individuals who were murdered for racial reasons, and then to do an interactive where we also have a partially 3D experience. So this is a case where the design is as important and the artistic expression is as important as the reporting. To be able to partner with the extraordinary reporters at Frontline and then to push the envelope in the presentation of the material, that's really exciting. It's frightening, but what great is not a little scary? So that's what we've been up to with a huge team. I do want to say our lead creative design director is Tamara Shagalu from Atto Atto Pictures. She unfortunately is in Amsterdam and wasn't able to make our taping today, but is such a key partner in executing this vision, creating this vision, executing the vision along with the Frontline team.
Thank you for that. And just hearing you describe that, I mean, it's a reminder of why we're all fortunate to have you and this team in particular as the voices for this. So I'm speaking on behalf of all of the community when I say that it's just, we can't wait to see what work is done. So Rainey, now when you took over the helm of Frontline about 5 or 6 years ago, would you say your vision included expanding the production content? And there was a concerted effort to go beyond broadcast. So for this Unresolved project, we have the subject matter dealing with racial terror, which could have easily been only a documentary film, maybe similar to your series called Documenting Hate, which dealt with far-right groups in America. Why did you choose an interactive, digital-first approach to the storytelling in this instance?
Well, it's great that you asked a question that way, because it really could have been a remarkable film series, and we'll also include a documentary in this amazing effort, which because Dawn and I are thrilled that we're adding on a documentary being directed and produced by Hugh Barishian. And one of the things that I felt about this when it was originally pitched to me from the Frontline producers was the immensity of the names and the people. And so when you're doing linear documentaries, our real job is to actually narrow the lens, right? The more narrow you go, the more powerful it is. And what I felt this needed journalistically first was a real investigation into the breadth of the murders, racially motivated murders, and to then ask accountability questions of the government. That was sort of the heart of this, was how do we take this immensity and then how do we present it? And one of the first ideas was a serialized documentary series. So we thought we could have 4 or 5 of these cases. And then the more we talked, I kept thinking interactive. And we have done a number of interactives, as you know, and you mentioned. And my mind went creatively to an interactive form. Fortunately, the producers at Frontline think about this too. And we really do start with what is the right form for this journalism? And this one was just crying out for a bigger story, a bigger takeout, and something that was more accessible. We wanted to make this accessible to schools. We wanted middle schoolers, high schoolers, college students to dive into this. And as we all know, documentaries do resonate with young people, but also their life is digital. They want to be in it. They want to experience it. So the forum led us to this. And then, of course, partnering with Dawn and Tamara has been exactly what we hoped for. We really, and in my case, have been trying hard to center the voices that should be telling these stories. Like if you take For Sama, Wad Al-Khatib's storytelling in that was essential to its success, both to resonate, but also as a film and a piece of work, right? Her work was told as a Syrian woman telling this story. So we really wanted to find people we thought could tell the story from their perspective, but also with our support. And that's why it's worked out so well. And like Dawn said, it's always incredibly challenging but exciting when you're doing new forms. It's a space that Frontline is in often now, so we're a bit used to it. But you always feel like you're jumping off. Like here we go. And this time we're doing a museum installation, which we've never done. So this is quite a big step in an exploratory sense, right? In a form sense. But the idea of being able to walk through this, to experience life, in a very 3D but real environment was what resonated with us.
Let's take a look now at the installation designed by Atto Atto.
So what you're seeing here is a series of 13 panels that are built with a iridescent fabric between two sets of plexiglass. Etched on the plexiglass are the names of all 151 murdered people on the Till list. And when you will download an app and onto your phone, and when you approach the panels with the app, you will say the name of the person who is on the list, and then from there their name will illuminate, and you will have a 3D more information about their life and the mystery surrounding their deaths. So it's at night the names will be lit, so they will be literally floating in space. As you walk through the circular exhibit, you will hear the echoes of all of the names until you choose a name that you will experience more deeply their story. So, this design just blew us away. The idea that you are surrounded by the names. And one thing to really emphasize is these are the 151 names that comprise the list. This in no way is an exhaustive list of all of the Americans who were killed as a result of racial hatred or racial violence. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. But we really wanted people to be able to just begin to experience the breadth of these types of crimes and to really reckon with that. So this is a way. You say the person's name, you experience their life, you give honor to their life, and then you hear about the circumstances of their life and death.
And speaking with that, actually, and this is really for both of you, and I think about just who is in this audience today, for example, and the fact that there are filmmakers and interactive producers who are probably interested in the actual process, the mechanics of it. I know, Dawn, you've worked with, as we mentioned in the intro remarks, that a lot of notable media organizations, and you've been a director, you're a producer, executive producer, you've partnered with a lot of these groups in so many ways. And so I'm curious about just the mechanics of your approach, this collaboration. Also, Rainey, just if you could give us more insight into the approach that Frontline takes specifically with respect to process. What are some of the foundational steps? How does this come together for those of us in the audience who are very curious about the mechanics of just this being? Can you offer insight on that?
Yeah, Dawn, do you want to dive in on that first? I think starting with the creative vision is really yours and Tamara's.
Yeah, that is why I think this project is so unique, because we have a huge attention to function, to the construction of the medium, but then we have what I like to think of as the Frontline special sauce, which is we're not just interested in beautiful art, which we have. We're interested in how the art serves the story. And at the foundation of the story is the reporting. So having the ability, it starts for me with the stories. What do we know about these investigations? What do we know about what was done or what was not done? And what do we know about these people on this list, and how what was the experience of their loved ones going through this traumatic process of having a person killed, and then the process of trying to uncover what happened. So the with a basis of solid reporting. And so, one thing to emphasize is this project is going through all of the rigors of the frontline process. We every artistic decision is fact checked. So we've created environments for that are factually accurate. We've also, double and triple checked, each of to be confident that we could say with clarity and with in respect to the frontline name, that all of our facts are accurate. But so we have that regular frontline process, which, they do so well. But then added to that is this creative vision that Tamara has really spearheaded, to have us experience this reporting, as Rainey says, with such a focus. So we want to surround you with this story so that it's not a 2D flat experience, but it's all around you. And so the creative decisions are meant to bring these people to life and the circumstances of their lives and deaths to people, so that you can, we live in such a fast-paced society. One of the things that I love about this project is it invites you to slow down. It invites you to use all of your senses, to use your ears, to use your heart, as well as your eyes. And so I think for me, what is so exciting about this opportunity is when you approach, for example, the installation, which, as Rainey said, we have the installation at a museum installation, but it'll also be a traveling exhibit. So we can share that with schools. We can have individual students experience this beautiful piece of art that also has factually, incomparable reporting. So they're experiencing both. And neither is sacrificed for the other. They both have to be equally strong. And that's something to me that's really unique about this project.
Yeah, I really appreciate everything Dawn said. She's an incredible executive producer on this. And I want to just say, like you, Brenda, I am literally an acolyte. I watch everything she's ever done. And
Me too.
Dawn's history is that she was also a lawyer, a legal, mind, standards and practices at ABC News, where I was also a young producer. And so the trust that we have editorially is essential, right? So that editorial trust is huge. The creative jumping off point comes from the editorial journalism, right? But then we can really fly. And one of the things I realized in talking about the technical, how do we do this, is it has taken a number of years for us to build some expertise in this. I would say Frontliner, we're still beginning to really become expert at the interactive form. And that's something that I just want to be clear about. There are people out in the world who have been doing this for literally decades who are so great at this. And so we're partnering with external producers like Tamara because they're the ones who really know how to tell this story interactively in a 3D way. And we really are filmmakers, right, who are still learning this. But I will say that my interest derived from being a mother. And I will share a story that I think is really instructive for all of us who are trying to reach youth, is that my kids, and my daughter in particular, could not speak as a baby and into her toddler years. And so one way she was accessed to help her speak was through an iPad. And it was actually, she's now 11, it was the first generation iPad. And it was an aha moment when I watched her more than a decade ago immerse herself inside this environment so organically. She was native to that environment in a digital sense, right? She was there, she was experiencing it. And I kept wondering, what does this mean for the linear form? What does it mean when young people have an expectation of being immersed? And actually at that time, I decided that Frontline needed to start to think deeply about how we were going to literally reach young people. And one way that we did this is through the interactive forum. And in fact, I went back to school for a whole year to learn about this at MIT. I became a fellow at MIT to actually start to understand these forms so I could actually lead effectively instead of just phoning it in and talking about it. I wanted to understand the form. And from my perspective, I just want journalists to have a seat at this interactive table. I don't need us to lead everything, but I just want factual journalism to be able to survive in a sense, right? And so this is one way that I see us, leaning into our future. And with Dawn's help, it doesn't happen without her.
Yeah, and I really want to pick up on the point about just Dawn's background. I mean, part of the reason why I connect so strongly with all of her films, and as I said, going back to Gideon's Army, I have a legal background as well, and I can feel how her background as an accomplished attorney informs her storytelling, because I'm coming in even myself with an assumption that, her mind is trained. Dawn, your mind is trained to see the many different angles of a story and a person, and you're examining, and whether you agree or not, like you have the ability to issue spot and sort of in your mind automatically fact check, because you're trained to look for all those angles. It makes for quite a unique perspective as a filmmaker. And so she comes in with that heightened information, and I see it reflected in the work and just the quality of how issues are dealt with and how perspectives are offered. So it's a really unique position to be in. I think it absolutely makes for more fascinating content for us as audiences to take in, because we don't always get to have people with legal training, also storytellers who can bring that skill set to create better, more accessible material for us. So it is one of my favorite things about her and her films. I think it actually does make for even more quality storytelling. So, well, let me say this. I want to just take a moment to just talk about Frontline and the moment that we're in. And I'll say that last year, and just sort of even the past couple years, I see many organizations and companies, they're responding to these issues in the wake of everything that we've gone through, this long overdue racial reckoning that we're now experiencing. There are the protests and this inflection point on race. One thing I want to note, it doesn't seem that Frontline was exactly catching up, so to speak. Frontline was somewhat ahead of this issue, right? I mean, decidedly ahead. Rainey, I'm curious to know, can you just shed more light on the internal work around diversity efforts and how that is actually informing the Unresolved project? I'd be quite interested in hearing that.
Sure. It actually has been everything for me. I took over Frontline almost 6 years ago, and I understood at that point that if I was going to continue to lead Frontline, I had to change it. I had to really lean into the idea of new voices. And it is not to diminish, like, the incredible work of Frontline, the legacy of Frontline is really significant. But I felt just for myself as a leader that I needed new voices. And so I actively recruited, hired, and fundraised millions of dollars, really frankly, to bring in new people and to transition our staff, to actually increase our staff so that we have digital producers, impact producers like Erica Howard, who's just incredible and a partner to me in so many ways on all of this. Carla Boras, who runs and actually pitched us the story in the first place. And people who lead, like Sarah Childress is our third person in charge of all of Frontline's editorial, who really thinks hard with me about what are the stories we should be telling. And importantly, reaching out to filmmakers of color from across both the United States of America filmmakers, but also the world. So one thing that we were noticing is somebody like Waad Al-Khatib, we would have told a story, and it would have been a good story, about Syria, as we have done for years, flying in a Western filmmaker into Syria. What I was interested in her work is what was her personal story as a mother. I just had this idea as a Syrian mother living this and experiencing this, it might actually also resonate more, right, with a Western audience. And I have an obsession on Syria. And so I've been looking at how does stories also, and increasing the diversity of our voices, how do they also resonate more with more people? And expanding our audience. I mean, so I had this idea a couple of years ago that if I couldn't sort of fix this and make this ethical, because I see it as ethical, like I see this as ethical leadership, it's just then I wouldn't be the right person to on Frontline. I was very clear about that with myself. I'm a filmmaker too. So I thought, like, if I can't do this and we can't do this in a way that feels like the right thing to do, then okay. So I gave myself 5 years, and what we've done is pretty remarkable. And we didn't catch up, but I will tell you, we have work to do. We weren't in the same situation other news organizations were in, but I see every corner we go around, I want to do more, not less. So this is where I am right now. It's not like screaming from the hills, we've done it. It's more like, I really believe we're starting this work right now in a real way. But I do feel multiple years into this with my partners at Frontline. Couldn't do it without them. And people like Don. I felt like I could pick up the phone and call Don a number of years in and say, Frontline might be a great place for you now. But, and years earlier, I probably would have waited and hesitated. So now I feel I can say this with credibility more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I hope
Let me ask.
This is
it
always
does.
interesting for me to talk about, but I also don't want to take too much credit because, people are also trusting in me too when we're doing this, right? It takes the filmmaking community too. Like Ramona Diaz is a great example. She just did 1,000 cuts with us. I had to pitch to her. And this is a really interesting thing. I am going out and seeking filmmakers. I am not assuming that filmmakers are going to come to me. I had to literally pitch Ramona, like, why Frontline and why me as the executive producer of Frontline would be a good home for 1,000 cuts. So I'm still humble about this. Hopefully I'll always be that way.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask Dawn, thinking about just this concept of intentionality, and which is what sounds like you're adopting that as part of your approach and had always sort of had that in the background. But, we see now over the last several years, there's been significant attention paid to not just creating diverse content, but also being intentional about who the creatives are behind the scenes. So Dawn, I'm curious to know, you've worked on a range of projects and teams. In your overall journey, and certainly on this project, how do you think this intentionality about diverse teams, just the way that you approach it, how has this informed this work in particular?
I think when you listen to how Rainey is speaking about the experience, essentially what she's doing is what any good leader does, which is figure out what's the best way into a particular story. And so, the first part is just as creators stepping back and asking that question. So, I do that myself. I'm, developing a project about Nelson Mandela, focused on his 70 hours of unheard audio tapes, 1992. So in the period 2 years after he was released from prison, but 2 years before he became president of South Africa. And when that project came to me, what filmmaker wouldn't, give her eye teeth to work on, something so special. But I also pointed out to the other producers that I'm not South African. And so a Western version of the Mandela story, I don't think that's what's needed in the world. I think, so we're partnering with 3 female South African directors of color to, we will work together on that story to assure that it's not a westernized, romanticized version of Mandela, but actually inhabited by, people who experienced it. These young women were taught in school that Mandela was a terrorist. That is a very different framing than any Western person would have, even if they were going back to examine his history. If you were taught for all of your school years that he was a terrorist, that you were going to come to facts differently. And that's just part of good storytelling and good understanding. So I think it's like incumbent upon all of us as creators to ask what we bring to a story. I'm a very big believer, and there are you can never have enough films about any one topic. There are infinite creative takes. So, I always try and ask myself, like, what am I bringing to the story, and not assuming what I'm bringing is the only thing to be brought, but just, I really, with every project, want to have something to say, and want to, but also I think, and this does come from being a standards and practices person, I want to be transparent about as possible about my biases. So, I made Trapped, which was a film about abortion providers. I'm pro-choice. I'm not, but that's not what that film was about. That film was about the laws that are regulating abortion. And so, it was really interesting making that. I did, and again, shout out to the lawyers. I did what I was taught to do as a lawyer. I researched all of the laws. I wrote to each of the um, people who were sponsoring the trap laws, asked for comment, double checked, all the legislative histories. I mean, we did months of research into each of the laws. Um, and also asked them for comment and asked them to come on camera, and all of them refused, every single one in every single state. But I kept all those letters because I knew if I was clear about my pro-choice, personal feeling, that it was too important a subject for people to be able to dismiss it as pro-choice propaganda. It had to actually be grounded in truth. And so, one thing I would say to the filmmakers in this audience is sometimes people run from that kind of kicking the tires on their opinions. And I just would encourage people to lean into that. It only makes your work stronger if you are fair. I mean, I was always taught as a lawyer, but also as a news person, you give the person you're covering their best shot. You give them their best argument. That's the best journalism, because then you're really evaluating the strength of the arguments rather than trying to paint, a mustache picture of somebody. So, I just, yeah.
I would just
You're
add,
always.
I just wanted to add to that one of the statements I always make that just bounces off of what Dawn said is always report against your assumptions, right? You'll get, closer and closer to something that's more nuanced and also that you can stand behind. So part of the reporting here is accountability reporting on what did the government do and what did they not do, right? We're going through documents, we're FOIAing things, we're asking all these tough questions behind the artistic rendition so that this actually has impact journalistically. And I will say on Unresolved, the first call was to Dawn, right? Because of her body of work and who she is as a leader, right? I wanted an executive producer for this that was not me specifically only, because I really wanted her vision. I also wanted Tamara, but I just want to say a special shout out to people like Stanley Nelson and others who are speaking about the importance of Black-centered journalism and filmmaking. And from my perspective, what I'm trying to do is listen. I'm trying to understand that and to take it on and then to honor that, like to actually listen to people out in the world as Black producers and directors who haven't had as much of a voice as they should, right? And so it's a kind of partnership in the sense of me listening. And Black public media also is a big part of why we went with Otto Otto. We went to them to say, would you do this? Was in part because of Tamara, but also because Tamara owns her company, right? So the idea of a Black-owned company when we can. And these are intentional decisions because we can make those decisions. That's what's been the epiphany for me. That's not a hard decision to make at all. That's a righteous and good decision, but like we can make those decisions. We can take on that level of intentionality.
Yeah. I was just commenting that, Dawn, is in terms of just your perspective, I've heard you speak on a lot of panels. I actually recently took in a masterclass that you gave for Sundance Collab, and I just noted how open-minded you were in terms of like the perspectives that one brings to a story and who gets to be involved in the telling of a story and what each particular person could bring. And it really does provide a model for how all of us in the doc community should approach storytelling. And I again attribute that to just your ability to think through all the different perspectives and kind of see angles that other people can't see, and you're able to assign value to each of those angles from whatever vantage point they come. And it's definitely.
I'm glad my mother called you to say like all the nice things about me on this panel. But what I would really say is, I think if you're coming from another profession, that is very healthy because you bring best practices, hopefully, from your other experience to your filmmaking. And so, I think I agree very much with what you've said about bringing always like taking a look, and as Rainey says, reporting against your assumptions, against, just really thinking about, it is such a great feeling when you know that your art is grounded in the truth as far as you can tell. And I feel like that's also respectful to my subjects, that is putting out, what is truth, that is putting out as truthful an experience as possible. I also wanted to mention one of the things that I love about this project is that we have an extraordinary advisory board. So in addition to Stanley Nelson and Leslie Fields Cruz from Black Public Media, we have Rhea Combs from the Smithsonian Institution, who's in charge, the director of Black film at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. We have Ron Nixon, who's an outstanding reporter. We have Jerry Mitchell, who's an outstanding reporter. So Margaret Burnham, who's an expert at Northeastern on this list. So there's a mix of creative folks, but also journalism folks and film folks. And I think that it is that combination. It is that, kind of creative gallery that we've assembled where folks are pushing on their particular discipline. And I think what's going to end up happening is it's really going to polish this, this piece into, like the diamond that it should be. We're really all pushing ourselves to bring the best to it so that, all of this hard work is really, going to live up to the promise of this project. And there is great promise to this project.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, Brenda, about that. One of the things I've been thinking about is this deserves that, right? So this territory, these murders, it deserves this level of attention. And nobody is done it to this breadth and depth. But a lot of the people that she mentioned, from Jerry Mitchell to others, they've looked at particular cases. Bringing everyone together to do something this cohesive is key to change, right? It's key to impact. And that's the thing we've been thinking about is how does our journalism have that level of impact that it really should and deserves to have? This really should have been done decades ago, right? And so here we are in 2021 doing this, and we still need to do it. Our history it's alive and well right now, as we all know. And so we need to be looking at it and holding those to account who are still at the Department of Justice. Right? This is a time that we might be able to, bring these stories back alive again.
Mm-hmm. That ultimately was the high note that I wanted to close on. And I thought about, audiences will encounter these different components of this project. And I wanted to know just what your hopes were for what they would take away from this regarding this national conversation on race that's happening right now. Would you like to share any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really hope that people will be moved by the variety of lives that were impacted by these terrible crimes, and that they will, be able to really absorb the fact that behind each name on a piece of paper is an entire life and family that experienced this occurrence. But more than, and in addition to experiencing their lives and focusing on that loss, I want to focus on the potential for justice, that it is not too late to do the right thing, that it is not too late to examine our past and aim to do better in our future. And justice can look different for different circumstances. Things are hard, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And there is really a beauty and an importance in the trying.
Oh. Well, Dawn, Rainey, thank you both so much for sharing such insightful and inspiring perspectives today. I'm just so moved by this conversation. I can say safely, I think all of us in this audience are absolutely looking forward to the launch of this project just a few short months from now. So, in the meantime, for any of you in the audience who are interested in learning more about Unresolved, please visit the Frontline website at frontline.org. In the meantime, thank you all again for taking time to join us here at South by Southwest. Enjoy the rest of the festival.